Robert Oppenheimer, Manhattan Project, Atomic Bomb, World War II, Los Alamos, Trinity Test, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Welcome to Final Trees. Here we don't tell stories the way they are usually told. We trace the details that changed everything. True stories, mysterious events, and facts that left unforgettable mark. Let's begin. Can one montage the history of humanity in less than 1 minute? Can a physicist become the most dangerous man on earth without air holding a weapon or fighting in a single battle? And what if the proudest moment of his life became the one that hooded him for the rest of his life? On July 16th, 1945, a group of American scientists and military officers stood in the desert of New Mexico. The area was heavily guarded. No journalists, no civilians, and no one knew what was about to happen. On the middle of the silence stood a thin man wearing a simple hat. He was looking at a metal tower standing in the middle of the desert. He wasn't a general, he wasn't the president of the United States. He was a professor of physics. His name was Robert Oppenheimer. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8, then in one single moment, the night turned into the light. A gigantic flash lit up the desert, then a massive fireball appeared, bigger than anything humans had ever seen. A few seconds later, the blast we hit the ground, everything shook and silence. Phil Oppenheimer did not clap. He did not smile. He just kept looking at the gigantic mushroom cloud. Then he whispered words that would become famous all over the world. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. In that moment, the nuclear age had begun, but how did a university professor become the leader of the most secret project in history? And why did the United States choose him over hundreds of other scientists? To answer that, we need to go 40 years. In late 2042, the most secret project in American history began. Its name was never mentioned in the newspapers, and most government officials didn't even know the full details. Even the thousands people working inside it didn't know the real purpose. All they knew was that they had to follow instructions without asking any questions. The project was called the Manhattan Project, even though the name came from New York. The real work was happening across the United States, but the true heart of the project was a secret city built from scratch in the desert of New Mexico, a city that wasn't on any map and no one enter without special permission. Its name was Los Alamos. In a few months, hundreds of scientists arrived, then thousands more joined the team. Physicists, chemists, engineers, and military personnel, all of them worked behind barbed wire, another tight security 24 hours a day, and the man leading them all was Robert Oppenheimer. Even though he wasn't a soldier and he wasn't the most experienced scientist, he had something else. He could understand every felt on the bridge. The pieced minds together. That's why he quickly became the heart of the project. But the task wasn't easy. They were trying to build a weapon no one had ever built before. One mistake could destroy everything or cause disaster at the same time. World War II kept getting more brutal and everybody feared just one thing: the German scientists might reach the atomic bomb first. That's why time became their biggest enemy. Day and night they worked non-stop. Many times Oppenheimer slept only a few hours. Then he returned to the laboratories, moving between the teams, solving problems, checking every small detail until the project became his entire life. During those years, the US government spent billions of dollars of $2 billion at that time, equivalent to tens of billions today, and all of was for one experiment. If it succeed, the world would to change. If 8 years of work would be lost as the months passed, the scientists would closer, but one question remained: was the bomb actually work? No one knew. Some scientists even feared the explosion might ignite the atmosphere. Even though the math it was impossible, the fear stayed with them until the last moment. Then the day finally, July 16th, 1945, before sunrise, everybody stood in the New Mexico desert. The bomb was mounted on a metal tower. The test was named Trinity. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. With every second, the tension grew. Then 8. By 29 in the morning, the button was pressed. A fraction of a second, the darkness vanished. The desert was lit up by a flash brighter than the sun. A gigantic fireball rose into the sky, followed by a massive mushroom cloud. Then the shock wave. Then the shock we hit the earth. Shock and silence. Still, no one could describe what they had just seen. Oppenheimer just looked at the cloud then. He remembered a line from the Bhagavad Gita and said, "Now I am become this, the destroyer of worlds." The test was a success. The boom worked, and from that moment it wasn't just science anymore. It became a political and military decision. The news reached President Harry Truman, who was attending the Potsdam Conference, and knew he had to make a decision that would change history. Germany had already surrendered, but Japan kept fighting, and the estimates said an invasion could kill hundreds of thousands of soldiers. So the American administration started considering another option: to use the new weapon, the weapon that the world had never seen before, and the decision that was about to be made would not only to change the war, but would to change the future of humanity. After the success of the Trinity test, the world stood on the edge of a new era, an era no one knew how it would. And inside the White House, the meetings kept going. The question in front of, of President Harry Truman looked simple, but it was one of the hardest decisions in history. Should the atomic be used or not? Japan was still fighting even after losing most of its navy, and even after the huge destruction it refused to surrender. The American military was planning an invasion of Japan, but the military reports said hundreds of thousands of soldiers might die. That's why some leaders believed the boom could end the war quickly, while others warned the world was about to enter an era no one could escape. In the end, the decision was made on August 6th, 1945. In American B-29 bomber took off. Its name was Enola Gay. On board was the first atomic bomb ever used in war. Its name was Little Boy. At 8:15 in the morning, the bomb was dropped over Hiroshima. Within seconds, entire neighborhoods dispersed. A gigantic fireball rose. Most of the city was destroyed. Tens of thousands were killed instantly, and many more died later from radiation. But the war wasn't over. 3 days later, on August 9th, another American plane took off. This time it carried a different bomb. Its name was Fat Man. The target was Nagasaki. Once again, a massive explosion, widespread destruction, and heavy loss. Less than a week later, on August 15th, 1945, the Japanese emperor announced The surrender of Japan and World War II finally ended, but for Robert Oppenheimer, it wasn't a happy ending at first. He was hailed as a hero. The newspapers called him the man who ended the war. Politicians praised his achievement, and he became the most famous scientist in America. But as time passed, he started feeling the weight of what had happened. He knew his invention wasn't inside a lab anymore. It had become a weapon capable of destroying entire cities. In one meeting, President Truman he said words the world would never forget. I feel that my hands are covered in blood. Truman didn't like what he heard. He later said he never wanted to see Oppenheimer again as the Cold War began. A new started this time between the United States and the Soviet Union. A nuclear arms race, but Oppenheimer didn't support it. He opposed the hydrogen bomb and warned about the nuclear arms race. That was the beginning of his troubles in 1954. After long hearings, his security clearance was removed. He wasn't imprisoned. He wasn't charged with treason, but his role in government was over. He became a scientist living away from the center of power. Even so, he kept teaching, giving lectures, and writing about science and the future of humanity. On February 18th, 1967, Robert Oppenheimer died at the age of 62 after a battle with cancer, but his story didn't end there. Decades later, in 2022, the U.S. Department of Energy officially rejected the old decision that had stripped him of his security clearance and declared that he had been treated unfairly. After almost 70 years. His reputation was officially restored. So the question remains, was Robert Oppenheimer a hero because he helped in the war, or was he the man who opened the door to a nuclear era that the world still lives in today? Maybe no one will will ever agree, but one thing is, is certain: a decision made on a quiet desert on July 16th, 1945, to change human history forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the notification bell. I will see you on another true story, even more mysterious and fascinating. Goodbye.